Hello, everyone. My name is Erica, and welcome to the Executive Unscripted podcast. I finally did it. I transitioned to video. I just want to commend every single content creator out there who just picks up their phone or their camera and hits record. It took me a long time to sit down and actually do this. This is a very vulnerable moment for me right now. I'm not really one for being recorded in front of the camera. I am totally okay grabbing the mic and speaking in front of thousands of people, being recorded and recording and speaking to all of you in this capacity is a whole different experience for me. So I really commend those content creators who just get up and do it and their bravery. And I also want to acknowledge one of my nearest and dearest who actually pushed me to do video, really encouraging me, Adam, who he just bought me gear and really pushed me to get in front of the camera and to share everything face to face with you and my experience in leadership and what I have to share with all of you. So thank you, Adam. He went as far as to got me some really nice gear. So here I am, thanks to him and him even setting up my lighting. So I want to go over something today that is just, more offshoot from what we've been discussing in the last several episodes of the podcast. And when we talk about true leadership skills and we talk about what it really takes to lead and how that internal environment of yours is the key ingredient to being a successful leader. And I think we need to stop associating emotional weight of leadership as something of somebody getting the boo-hoos, like I'm crying, I'm upset, and I think we've really diluted the meaning of emotions in leadership because we don't understand that leadership isn't just control and command. It's not just authority. And I want to talk about a very specific skill today in leadership, and more specifically, diplomacy in leadership. Diplomacy is, to me, an extraordinarily underrated skill when it comes to the skill set and the resources and that toolbox that leaders have and they possess. Leadership doesn't teach, or the courses that we've all done or training or curriculum that we've had. I don't remember diplomacy really being a skill set that was taught. Lately, I've been really experiencing executives losing their diplomacy, and it's been jarring. And there have been times where I've wanted to lose my cool and my composure, especially in environments where I am being questioned in my integrity and my decision making. And I really had to take a close look at myself and remember how I get triggered. And one of my triggers is when people question my decision making. And I automatically assume that people believe that I am operating out of integrity, trust, and that I know what the hell I'm doing. And people should also know that when I don't know something, that I'm going to say it. I know I'm different in that sense where there's a lot of leaders who don't want to expose their weaknesses, but I'm not afraid to expose my weaknesses because I am not great at everything. I am not a fantastic CFO. I am not great at marketing. I am hardly creative. So I understand where my weaknesses are in our ability to enact diplomacy, that we tend to just make everybody in the room happy. We're avoiding tough conversations because people think that diplomacy is the appeasement of everybody in the group or your organization, and that is far from the truth. People also interpret diplomacy as weakness, that you're just sitting back, that it's avoidance, that you're not addressing difficult situations. That is not what diplomacy is. Diplomacy is the actual enactment of emotional regulation in a very heated or complex situation, and your ability to stabilize it despite what's going on in your head, despite the emotions that you're feeling or fueling up with. That's what diplomacy is. You're not exploding, you're not reacting in real time. You are taking steps back, observable steps back. You are observing every facet of every dynamic in that particular situation that you're in before making a decision that ultimately affects everybody. I very recently encountered an issue with a very high ranking executive where my decision making and my judgment were put into question. And I was told to fix something immediately without being able to give context to something that I didn't even do. I had zero play in what had transpired from this particular situation. I did not make that decision. This just happened to be an effect of a circumstance of somebody else's decision. And rather than receiving or being able to give the clarity that that decision was centered around and how I was far removed from it, and rather than the executive leader asking for that clarity, a snap judgment was made. And internally, I my fuse was ready to rupture. And it was unfortunate because I was again noticing that I'm the one having to really enact deep, deep diplomacy to not allow my emotion to get the better of me. And that is emotional weight. That is emotional labor in leadership. That is what sets apart true leaders, serious leaders, thoughtful leaders from other people who are just acting like they're leaders. And I'm not tooting my own horn, but I think it's something we need to really pay attention to internally because I've had plenty of moments where I've blown it. I've had plenty of moments where people have learned exactly what's on my mind because sometimes you do require quick tactical command type of decision making, and it's not always soft and it's not always going to make everybody feel warm and fuzzy, right? And I think there's a lot of, again, misconception when it comes to diplomacy that it is about the warm and fuzzies. It is absolutely not. There's studies coming out of Harvard and all the big business schools where they are seriously looking at levels of diplomacy and the correlation of emotional regulation and emotional discipline in leaders and how they create sustainable environments. That is huge because we now see that diplomacy is a requisite for stable environments and stable organizations. And it then in turn creates the leader as the steward of those emotional environments, of those highly relational environments. You become a steward. Not every situation, and there I work in environments that are closely related to tactical decision making, where that command and control is necessary for life threatening situations. And I know people in those situations. But when you don't downshift and you don't regulate yourself from those tactical types of situations, and you are now back into an emotional and very deeply human relational environment, you are misaligned. You are going to misfire. You are not going to have the same approach and mindset as you would for that different situation in a different environment. So we get to see how nuanced leadership is. You're not tied to one specific style. You're not tied to one specific tactic. You're not tied to one specific way of leading. Every single ecosystem requires you to be a chameleon, basically. You have to master that. You have to master your ability to lead differently in different contexts. And to have that stewardship in mind and to have that diplomacy of mind in highly flammable and highly volatile contexts and organizations, that could be your make or break. You could essentially create an entire culture based on your ability to understand what true diplomacy is within your organization. I've been reading the book Thinking Fast and Slow, and it's so interesting because you as you read the book, you understand how we as humans just immediately place judgment on situations without fail. We are immediately applying our own perception of a certain situation rather than receiving context, rather than asking questions, rather than putting our emotions in check. We create stories, we create the judgment, and then we make decisions through the perception of the judgment we created. It's almost a slippery slope, right? We create the story in our head. I mean, sometimes things are obvious. They're very obvious, but sometimes things are nuanced. And a lot of times things are nuanced, especially in organizations and you're dealing with different people. There is no ability sometimes to just create snap judgment. Sometimes you are lent the time to assess and to gather context. But when you have created a perception and judgment in your head and you make a snap decision or are going to somebody and immediately accusing or asking all the wrong questions, you are going to create a culture of pointing fingers, of snap judgment. So you are, as the leader, again, responsible for that. You, again, leadership is just so dynamic in that way. And again, I will say this 100 times so that everybody understands that leadership is not just a rank and title. When I say leadership, I mean a person in a position who has influence over others. You may not have the title, you may not have the pay, you may not have the ability to make executive decisions. If you have influence over people, you are creating culture. You are a steward of those emotions. You are a steward of your emotions and how you influence your environment. Point blank, period. There's I don't think there's one leadership guru out there who would argue with that. And so again, it required leadership requires an enormous amount of emotional availability within yourself to check yourself during real high stakes moments, to understand whether you're going to be in a room and approach something tactically or relationally. And when you get to that point and you're able to actually regulate yourself, you're becoming the best possible leader. You're becoming a leader of the people, of your people, because you understand that if you are able to regulate your emotion, you're able to sit, assess, and understand the impact of your response to certain situations and how that is going to affect everybody else. That is actually diplomacy, not the appeasement of others. It's the ability to see how your stewardship and your leadership of the situation is going to affect everybody else. Again, there's research studies on this, and I've been reading a lot about it in, again, Harvard Business Review, and emotional intelligence is always at the forefront now of all of these leadership conversations. Why? Because we are living in such emotionally reactive times where people are so quick to spout emotion and just use that as their driver for decision making. We are in a highly reactive culture right now. And it's all snap judgment. It's all immediate reactivity. It's all about you telling people how you feel immediately and ask for forgiveness later. Well, sometimes you've created enough collateral damage within your organization that there's going to be no asking for forgiveness. So, again, let's study diplomacy. Let's study how we can be better stewards of our environments. And so that is what I wanted to share with you all today, that we need to be real regulators of ourselves, and we need to be true regulators of those in our care, in the sense that we're able to regulate emotion and we're able to stabilize that emotion and all of that within our environment. If you're in a position, very, very high position of authority, and you're not gathering all the information before you make judgment, you have to really take a step back and evaluate how you are showing up as a leader. Sometimes situations call for you being a hard ass, and that's okay. Sometimes situations do require passion, they do require, again, those tactics. But when you are, and again, in that position of influence, title or not, if you have the ability to influence the room or the people around you, you are now responsible for that culture. And that culture depends on your emotional resilience and your emotional regulation. And it depends on your ability to act diplomatically in tough situations. I'm going to leave you there. Again, thank you so much for tuning in. My first video. I hope that we got a little bit out of it and we are now able to think about how we show up and how we are making our decisions when little context is provided. So, if that struck a note with you, shoot me a DM, shoot me an email. And if you have a story where you had to exercise the utmost levels of diplomacy, share it with me. I'd love to hear it. And maybe I'll read a story of yours on the next episode or upcoming future episode. With that, thank you so much for tuning in. Again, my name is Erica, and thank you for tuning in to the Executive Unscripted podcast. Till next time.